concept itself is stretching back to the 10th century or so, almost 6,000 years, because it has been part of the Vedic culture in India. Just like Sun Tzu Ping Fa, in India there was a strategist. He was virtually a prime minister for about 4 to 5 kings. He was a guidance, counselor, strategist. His name is Chanakya. And Chanakya wrote this, it's like a treatise. He wrote something called the Arthashastra. Arthashastra is basically a treatise on the whole of the strategies of government, of warfare, of relationships. It's almost an index of life that was lived in at that time. Sama is a very interesting word. In general, it means to be able to persuade, but in a gentler, in a more amicable fashion. So you might call it amicable persuasion. Nobility. That means it's not about deception. You don't use it as diplomacy per se, where you try to be nice for the sake of just winning that person over, and then your job is done. Whereas Sama talks about winning them over from their position to yours, but at the same time winning their hearts. The purpose of it is to convey your point in as pleasant a manner as possible, where you try to be gentle and kind and noble and present your idea. So that's called Sama. And it's not that Sama is a one-time effort. Sama indicates in the sense that you will keep on doing this for a certain period of time, but it has to be something that is reasonable by your own mechanism or your own understanding. So you say, okay, I've been doing this now for a week, or I've been doing it for 3 days. It could be just 3 hours, but then it depends on the time frame upon which you need this work done. Whatever that time frame is, you say, okay, I'm going to try Sama for this period of time. So if you've got 2 weeks, you can take, 3 days or 5 days. And if it doesn't work, then you progress to the second stage. The second stage, which is Dana. Dana is not about being purely aggressive. Again, it's misunderstood by many people because when it's depicted in history, it's shown as a threat. But I'm not excluding threats from part of being Dana. Definitely, you can. It is where you start, threatening gently. You start using stronger language. You can be, reasonably aggressive depending on the individual you're talking to. But you go from being nice to being firm and resolved. So the key to Dana is firm resolution. So you move in with a firm resolution. The key, again, remembering that we are going on this path to conviction. At no point do we want to lose the individual that you're dealing with. That is not an option in this strategy. If that individual gives up anywhere along the way and chooses to leave, that's his call. But on your part, you're not edging him out. Dana, where this firm, resolute approach comes into play, basically begins, and you ratchet it up. You begin, on a softer scale, and you slowly ratchet it up, to the point where you think you have reached your limit. So in some cases, some individuals, it's a hammering, right? A verbal hammering. This is not anything physical at any stage. It's all about verbal interaction. Verbal hammering is absolutely necessary, but depending on the nature of the individual. See, the individual that you're dealing with can have different levels of sensitivity. You're not there to break that individual, and you cannot ever hammer somebody that you cannot empower. So if you don't have the ability to uplift someone, then you also do not have the authority or the right to hammer him. So the key here is when you hammer someone or when you scold someone, you use everything, because you started with cajoling, right, in a placating manner, and moved on into this more firm, resolute approach. And even necessary, you have to have displays of anger to show how resolute you are, because a person needs to know that you are absolutely determined to convey this message. He must be very clear that there cannot be, at any point in these 4 steps, there cannot be a vagueness about it. It has to clearly move from Sama to to Dana. At Dana, you are like this, in his face. So, but you get this slowly. You don't get into Dana just like that in a second. You ratchet it, you ratchet it, you ratchet it until you reach your limit. Then you go to Beda. Beda is the third situation, and that's where you call for an arbitrator. Now, the better word would be adjudicator, because an arbitrator basically comes in to solve the situation regardless of whichever way morality lies or whichever way the ethics lie. Adjudicator is also morally, impelled to move in a particular direction. And it doesn't mean that a person must be in a higher status than you. It could be friends, it could be peers, it could be anyone that you trust to be neutral. And that's the key to Beda. In Beda, the person is neutral inherently. So both sides recognize, okay, this is someone who has no particular side. And therefore that becomes an acceptable solution. You approach this individual and you convey, both sides are conveyed, because one can look at the same problem and have two totally compelling, descriptions of that. So they will both present to the adjudicator, right? And this individual will then, give his suggestions. It may not be a yes and no. It may be a compromise. It also could be, maybe broken down into parts. All right, and all of that is something that you must both agree upon when you reach the Beda stage. But then again, you see, a Beda cannot solve the situation. He's not there to solve it for you, nor should he be an easy recourse. His purpose is to get you two to work together, so that ultimately both of you go back to the negotiating table. But now you are armed with different facets, and you can go to more than one Beda. So that's Beda in a nutshell. Now moving forward, you come to the last stage. Now one would assume that Dandam is final, but it's not, because at no stage in the art of relationship do you see the total breaking of the relationship as necessary. If that person, the other person, chooses to walk away from you, there's nothing you can do about that. That's entirely their decision to make. But as long as the person is standing in front of you, your door must always be open. Dandam, in a sense, basically means to sever temporarily, always temporarily, but to sever the relationship, take a break from the relationship, so you both can have breathing space. Now, you don't generally go to Dandam easily either. It's not a cop-out. It's actually meant to be something that progressively leads to this point where you need to take a break. It's that break that you have in between, rounds in the boxing ring. You come out, you have a break, and you renew your conviction and everything, and go back in again. So Dandam, in a sense, is meant to give each other a break, but always with the door open. So Dandam basically means to take a break, and then the cycle starts again. So this process, this art of relationship management, has worked for me and continues to work for me. It is a very apt insight into human nature. As you progress along, you'll find that each of these stages actually have many, many different processes to it that you can employ, because each one has different facets, and everyone standing before you is different anyway. The process is something that changes as the person changes. For example, when you're dealing with a superior, you can't sever the relationship, but you can very clearly let him know that insofar as this particular phase of the relationship is concerned, you are basically taking a hiatus. So you just basically, we can talk, we can be civil, but I'm, totally not going to accept this. But we must have this path in mind as we're dealing with a relationship. Each one of us have to find our own way to apply. But it's actually simple. Always start off Sama, courteous, smiling, pleasant. Overall effect of Sama is that you're trying to win the person over without being deceptive. And that's the key, because this is based on genuine, sincere feelings. So you put your heart on your sleeve. This is not a tactic. Tactic is part of a strategy. You may not be convinced on your tactics, but you must be always convinced on your strategy. So the overall strategy of Samadana, Veda Dandam, is relationship management. Meaning, the purpose is to convince, all right? So conviction, that means you are on the process of trying to share your thoughts with those around you. All the 4 stages lead to the same conviction. The challenge is to remember that always, even in the last stage. Because this is not a process whereby a relationship is lost. It is a process by which a relationship is maintained and managed, if not actually improved upon. So that's the purpose of this philosophy, the art of management.